So on go, you press the record. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. What is up, Dodger Familia? Coming at you from the Tin Can Studios in Los Angeles and Orange County, California.
Live.
This is the Let's Be Frank podcast, season 4, episode 2. I am Frank Lopez with the one and only Frank Martinez. And, Frank, how are you doing, first and foremost?
I'm doing well. Trying to squeeze this episode in, while we got some other responsibilities to tend to. But first things, priorities,
Right. So we're just trying to do back-to-back weeks. We're trying to get on a little hit streak here. So first, mainly we just wanted to hear from you guys, right? So we got a few mailbag questions out there. Not much news has really happened. Well, baseball news since the last recorded episode. A lot of speculation, small deals here and there, but nothing crazy. So we thought, what better thing to do than answer the questions that the listeners have. So this is going to be a mailbag episode, probably a shorter one. It has to be a shorter one. and we'll get to those right now, unless you have something else to open with, Frank.
No, I think we're good to jump right in, and whatever I had will probably be touched on as we respond to mailbag questions. So let's do
Absolutely. Yeah. Nobody rants better than us.
Right. So let's jump into Instagram first. We don't give Instagram enough love.
Right.
I think that's just because we're probably both you and I mean, I'm speaking a little bit for you. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but a little more proficient with the Twitter than the IG.
Yeah. Absolutely. We're fluent in Twitter language, not so much on the IG, but we're getting there.
Working on it. So first question is going to be, again, we're going to go through IG, and it's at Let's Be Frank Pod on Twitter. Well,
it'll be that.
Yes. Soon enough. On Instagram, facebook.com/Let's Be Frank Pod. So let's join. This is Moto Vroom 757 on Instagram. The question was, where'd you guys go?
All right. Well, thanks for the question there, Moto Vroom. Let's get a name here. Moto Vroom. See if he has a name. Do you have a name, Moto Vroom? Let's see. How long does it take to get to? There you go. View profile. D. All right, D. All that for one letter. Where did we go? Well, we've been, it's been a crazy, obviously 2020 for a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons. And mainly COVID is probably the common denominator on all of them. So that's forced a lot of movement and a lot of different things. But this has always been a thing we wanted to continue, always been a thing that we enjoy. It's always a highlight of my week when we get to do it. So, we were gone because I moved at some point, that kind of set things back a few weeks, and work has just been, the schedule has just been crazy. Things seem to be normalizing there, which is great. So speaking for myself, it's just been a little bit of that. But all in all, I'm, just grateful that we get to do this again. And thanks for the concern.
Yeah, I appreciate that on my end. Just, father of 4, real busy in my church. I do a lot with that. And I was busy losing 105 pounds. So that required a lot of exercise, a lot of, just different things, man. That really was a lot of effort on my part. That, my next endeavor is debt freedom, freedom from debt and clearing all of our debt, which we're working on. But one of my friends said something so poignant about that, about any endeavor that you're working on. It could be school, any pursuit that you're really, really focused on. He says, it's got to become an obsession.
Yeah. And
when it becomes an obsession, you'll find true success in it. And I think the whole fitness journey has become an obsession for me to some degree.
Uh-huh.
And that really is would wipe out my mornings, my sometimes middays, and especially my evenings.
Yeah,
so
there's times I'll be waking up and you're already done with your workout. I feel like
my first workout. Yeah.
yeah. Jesus Christ.
But that's part of it, and in just overall conflicting schedules. You mentioned on our text the other day, you're a night owl. I'm more of an early bird, so there's that to navigate. But here we are, man, and thanks for the question, for the concern, and we're back at it.
Yeah. One thing is that we do have 2 episodes that we recorded. We just didn't get around to editing, none of that stuff, and one of those is kind of a World Series reaction. So at some point, the plan is to edit that, cut that up, and put that out. We'll wait for a good time. Right. Maybe like at a down part of the season,
Yes, it's in the archive.
Lifted. It's in the archive. So The intention is to put that out there. So it's not that we didn't try. It's just, some things just don't work out the way they're planned. But yeah, thanks again, D.
Yes, sir. Thanks. All right, let's get to this question. Throw it in there, my friend Isaac. It's a slamberry underscore at its Instagram, and his question is not baseball related, but it's worth a couple. It's worth a minute or two chatting. What's the solution to the Nets? This is basketball. The Nets defense. I say trade Kyrie for more pieces.
So are we the Nets Be Frank podcast now?
Nets beef. There it is.
It's another sports report. That's what we got. So the Nets defense. Look, obviously I'm not as much of a basketball guy as you are, but just from an outsider's perspective and from what I know about sports, the Lakers, I can only speak on behalf of the team that I follow, which is the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers. And things seemed to work out for them last year. So I feel like defense, other than like blocks, was not the strength of the team like throughout the season. But it showed up in the playoffs,
You're talking about the Lakers, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it showed up in the playoffs, and they had some runs where it's like some of the best defense I had ever seen, ever, right? Dwight Howard had a lot to do with that, and Rajon Rondo with the steals, and obviously, when LeBron locks anybody down, he took Jimmy Butler, right? Like that was the thing.
Yeah,
I mean, like there's just like little moves that were made, and honestly, that really just came down to effort, man. That just came down to effort, and I think James Harden and Kyrie Irving, I think their criticism has always been effort on the defensive end. I think that's kind of always been their thing. But look, as long as they get in, which they obviously will, to the playoffs there, and that might be a switch they could just turn on, to be honest. They might need just one of those like energy players down low, if they really want to compete with the Lakers, because I don't know who on that team guards when what's his name's on the bench, when DeAndre Jordan's on the bench, who has an answer for, I mean, Anthony Davis down low. And, if you don't want to pull DeAndre Jordan out to the perimeter because Anthony Davis can shoot the ball too, and then down low from there. So they might need that type of help. I don't know. That's X's and O's at this point. But I think it just might be a thing they could turn on, to be honest, because Durant's going to guard everyone's best player, right? That's kind of like what's expected there. And in the East, James Harden's going to have to go up against who? Jimmy Butler, right? As a 2 or
depends. Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to deal with the Milwaukee Bucks, so that's going to be, an issue.
Yeah, you would think it's Durant on Giannis, though, right? Like, there's just different things there. So I don't know. It might just, honestly, I feel like there is another level they can get to as far as defense, and that just really comes from effort. And honestly, during the season, guys just don't like to put in that effort. I don't know why.
Yeah, they're just conserving. And while you're not dealing with a group that has been through the wars together, and that might be the bigger issue than their defense right now, or their offense, one ball with 3, major ball handlers or whatever, ball dominant guys. They've individually been through wars. I mean, Harden's been through plenty of playoff wars. Kyrie's a champion. Durant's a champion, all those separately. So it's really more about the chemistry than it is anything. Can they flip the switch chemistry-wise come playoff time? I think that's the question. Like, will they have had enough time together to be able to do that? But effort-wise, I think you're right. I think there is a switch effort-wise that they'll be able to flip and just give more. The question would then become at that point, will they have enough reps, in practice together for it to be effective against the better teams in the East, and ultimately if they were to come out against the best team in the West. So that's the big question. Yeah, cough. Defending champs.
There you go.
Yeah, trade Kyrie. I was on that initially, just more
when he wasn't playing. When he wasn't playing, it's like, what are you doing? But
I think you need to run it through with this team. You gave up enough pieces to try put this together and see what happens. And see what works out. And then you can address any flaws that are exposed in the playoffs in the offseason and figure it out that way.
Truth.
All right. Thanks for that question, Isaac. Appreciate
you. I think we could fool a few people with that answer.
Right. Yeah, I agree. All right. So let's go. Let's turn it to baseball, and then we'll get Dodger specific with the final questions. But this is a general baseball related question. And this is from the.david.robles. I'm assuming David.
Raymond David.
why do the Baseball Writers of Association of I'm sorry, butchered that. Why do the Baseball Writers Association of America hate baseball so much?
Uh, all right, so this is actually something that I'm a little passionate about.
Yeah.
Because the baseball writers they vote on things like the Hall of Fame, and that's what Raymond's alluding to here. The Hall of Fame, awards that we, consider prestigious, right? Like the MVPs, the Cy Youngs, things like that. These are the people that vote on them, right?
Right.
So it is. I mean, every year I try to like convince myself to care less and less about it because you realize how subjective it is. How each individual writer has a different opinion, right? And that's supposed to be the strength of the system, right? Like you have all these different writers from different teams, whatever, national writers, all this, and you would think that with all these opinions, you'd come up with one good solution here, right? But with the Hall of Fame specifically, man, like there's just this effort by these writers to just ignore history, and for what moral reasons, for what they think are moral reasons, and that's just what bothers me, man, because
Yeah,
like
subjective moral reasons.
right, and everybody has different ideas as to what that is, like I was just watching a comedy podcast with Ricky Williams on it, right? The NFL running back, and he's
Oh,
talking
right,
about
right.
and he's talking about how they were talking about how his legacy now, years, probably what, a decade at least after his retirement, has changed. Like it's flipped upside down because of the stigma and this everything around marijuana use, right?
Right,
So,
right.
um, and I feel like we're just not there yet with baseball. But unfortunately, these systems have a way of like kind of phasing guys out of being able to get voted into the Hall of Fame, right? It's like a few ballots that you're not on, or a few ballots that you don't get 75% of the vote or whatever. Like you're gone. So, um, my like I this always for me it always starts with Barry Bonds, right? Barry Bonds is the best player I've ever seen in my life, absolute best player, right? Now how he got to that point, steroids, right? Like that's pretty obvious, right? Although he never took a positive test throughout his career, um, but and I don't think he's admitted it to this point, but it was steroid use that made him really the home run champion, made him like that powerful hitter. Great player before we knew of any of this stuff, but um, Barry Bonds was my childhood, man. He was my childhood. I would have vivid memories of myself in my front yard throwing a ball against the wall, pretending to strike out who? Barry
Hmm.
Bonds.
Okay,
Barry
yeah.
Bonds, right? Um, a lot of these guys, but it always started with Barry Bonds. Bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, full count, bases loaded, up by one, strike three. I just struck out Barry Bonds. Like those are the scenarios I created for myself as a child, and what endeared me to this game. Like they're part of me now. So for these writers to think they could just ignore that part of history, uh, writers that were complicit in this, by the way, complicit in the steroid era, like
Yeah.
turned a blind eye to it, and all of a sudden they're trying to get on a high horse here and like tell people what they should and shouldn't do. I think it's really sad. It's something that's like offensive, like it's you can't, like I know that we've talked about this before, but like I want to be able to one day like take my kids to the Hall of Fame and let them know like, hey, these are the players that were, when I was a kid, like players that we that we used to hate or love or whatever, and these were the biggest players, and the players tell the stories of generations, and for me Barry Bonds is at the thick of it. After that you got guys like Roger Clemens and so forth, but um how are you not going to have, I mean, the home run king, the guy that's hit the most home runs ever in the Hall of Fame? It just doesn't make any sense. Um, so I just I think they just have a skewed version of what baseball should be, but I don't think it's the Baseball Writers Association of America's responsibility to really to decide what baseball should be, right? They need to just vote like, was this player good enough to get in or not, right? And we're really, it's just a really it's egregious that these people are voting for players currently off of standards that just didn't stand when those players were playing, and you can't judge a player off of a Hall of Fame candidacy off of 2020 standards, a player that played in 2005. Like, it's just not, so many things have changed since then, and back then that's just what was done, and it doesn't mean you ignore when they get voted in, like how they got to be great, because steroids are part of their story, but it's like, you don't, right. And the next half of that is Kurt Schilling, but we can get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Something you said, players tell the story of generations. And I mean, I think that kind of epitomizes what the Hall of Fame is supposed to be. It's the story of baseball, and it's the elite players, right? The best of the best. And in the Hall of Fame, you don't just have players that are inducted, but you have moments, you have situations that occurred, you have item gloves and bats and balls of
Yeah.
special baseball moments throughout the history. So it all comes down to that. It's telling the story of the history of this sport. And so for these guys to pick and choose which stories can be told in that prestigious place and which stories cannot, for their own personal opinions, their own personal viewpoints on the person as opposed to the actual accomplishments on the baseball field.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're, who are they to be in position to do that? They're a at this point organization with very little oversight as it pertains to the Hall of Fame, and they're voting on that and other awards and whatnot. They don't have any real accountability to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the bigger issue. It's like, well, who put you in those scenarios? It's, somebody at some paper that then eventually you were selected to be,
Yeah.
in this particular group. So I don't know. I think that part of it, and then you just mentioned the standards, and the standards are just so mixed up. And it's like, okay, fine. I mean, I have my personal opinions on Barry Bonds. My main thing that I've come to, and it's been a journey, just because number one, he's a giant, I hate him, but I'm a baseball fan overall.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's like, why did you cheat? You didn't have to cheat. You were a
Yeah,
Hall of Famer
he's
before
so
the
good.
cheating. Like, dude, I would have loved to see where his career would have ended up without the cheating.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? In a similar way, but much different, I would love to see where Ken Griffey's numbers and stats would have ended up without the injuries, or let's just say if Ken Griffey had cheated and maybe had been able to return from some of those injuries, which is another benefit of performance enhancers, where could he have ended up? But in any event, as it pertains to the baseball writers of America, yeah, these guys, I mean, we got to fix that. I'm like you when you said, you try to just convince yourself or get to that point where you care less and less.
Yeah.
But I do care, and it's hard.
Yeah. It's hard not to care about the Hall of Fame when you're when you're a fan. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's hard. And the other side of that coin is Kurt Schilling, man. Like, look, you look at Kurt Schilling's career numbers. It's, I would say, like, regular season numbers, borderline to above borderline Hall of Fame numbers, right? Like pretty
right there at the threshold, yeah.
Right there, right? Like have some very good seasons. I think what catapults him over the top is just his excellence in the postseason, right? So excellence in the postseason alone doesn't get you in, right? No. David Freese isn't a Hall of Famer. Why? Because he was great in the postseason, but he, during the season he was just a guy. Guys like I don't know. There's a long list of
Jock Peterson or Kike Hernandez.
Jock Peterson or Kike Hernandez, exactly. Because a lot of those are circumstantial. You're in a team good enough to get you there, blah, 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 blah. Kurt Schilling's numbers alone arguably could get him in, right? But his 2 seasons, one with the D-backs, one with the Red Sox, like, again, my childhood. Like, those were huge moment, like, series for me to really fall in love with the game. He was part of the Red Sox team that came back down 3-0 versus the Yankees. Everybody hated the Yankees at the time. Everybody was rooting for the Red Sox to break the curse.
Right.
The D-backs also going up against, Goliath. It was David versus it was David versus Goliath, an expansion team from 5 years previous. Like, that's and they go up and they beat the Yankees, which is
in an epic series, right?
Crazy. The bloody sock when he was pitching, like, all that stuff. For me, that's hands down catapults him in, right? He's been, I think, pretty irresponsible in his post-career decisions, assessment. Right? Like with the things that he said. I think he's pretty tone deaf to a few things, and whatever, right? But the reason he's not in the Hall of Fame right now is because of that irresponsibility afterwards. Now, should it cost him his candidacy in the Hall of Fame? My answer is no. I can care less like what these guys are saying. It's to me, it's an old man yelling at a wall. You know what I mean? Like I don't know why that matters. Like
Yeah, right.
Kurt Schilling painted like a huge portion of my childhood as a baseball fan, right? As a Major League Baseball fan, and to not see him in there, like if you have a hard line, like no steroid users can't get in. Okay, like if that's your, that's like okay, well what can I really tell you? You know, like that's okay. That's everybody's opinion. I just don't agree with it. But this, on the other hand, like how, like what's the correlation, right? There is a correlation between on-field success and steroids, right? There is. What's the correlation between, hey, I'm retired, I'm tweeting out some stupid shit, like now I'm not in the Hall of Fame? Like what is the correlation, right? And
As it pertains to baseball, right?
as it pertains to baseball, and I am tired of this, like what example does it set for the kids and blah 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 blah. Like that's not the reason, man. That's
Yeah,
not the
I mean,
reason.
as far as standards go, then let's go and inspect every single candidate's personal life, right?
Yep.
Is that going to be the part of the voting criteria? Is like, hold on, before we vote on any of your numbers and any of your
Yep.
baseball related in results or achievements, let me see what you tweeted. If you're on Twitter, let me see what you've ever posted on Facebook, what you've ever liked, what you you know what I mean? Like, how far are you going to go with that if you can have that standard? It doesn't make any sense.
There are people in the Hall of Fame, right, from Jackie Robinson days that were a part of the reason black people hadn't played yet. Like
Yes,
there are
right.
people in there. You know what I mean? So what's the moral high? Like where do
And if
we
you inspect
find
their
this line?
views at the time, if you inspect
Ooh.
their perspective, I guarantee you there's people in the Hall of Fame that didn't want Jackie breaking the color barrier, but they're
Oh,
in.
100%. If it was never an issue, wouldn't have
Yeah,
really,
then there would
you know
be
what I
no
mean?
Negro leagues. Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Which they just actually, all the Negro League stats this past year, they're
I
counting
saw
them
that.
as,
Yeah,
yeah,
finally.
which is great. I mean, that was a great league. So um so all of a sudden, maybe with stats like, or with situations like that, these writers want to be like, oh, well, it was a different time. We're not judge them now on their time, what was going on back then. Dog, steroids. Like, come on, it's the same thing. Like, judge what happened on the field. I'm not saying those people shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, right? I'm not saying that. They painted the picture of baseball back then. I'm saying now, like, come on, dude, to keep Barry Bonds out of the Hall of Fame, to keep Schilling out of the Hall of Fame, it's a travesty, man. It's a travesty, and like, you know, you look at asterisks, like they say, oh, Barry Bonds is an asterisk Hall of Famer, right? Well, right now we have an asterisk Hall of Fame to begin with because those people aren't in it, and um, there was a baseball writer that I was interacted with once. Remember when Puig was about to get traded that one time, and they said that he fled. He got in his car and left or whatever, just because when he got relegated to AAA that one time.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a baseball writer who's part of the Writers Association that misreported that, right? That misreported that, and um, I called him out on Twitter. I was like, hey, like you're painting this like unfair picture of like what's happening on this team. Like this is the team trying to compete, trying to, like it's unfair what you're doing. He replied back to me saying like, hey, I'm just reporting what I hear, what I know, whatever. Like, okay, well, if that's your job, just to report what's there, how about you carry that over to your Hall of Fame voting, dude?
Yeah, just report what's there. What are the
Report
achievements?
what's
What are
there.
they not? Right.
Exactly. And I think
Yeah, if your
that's what it boils
job
down
isn't
to.
worthwhile for you to do enough further investigative journalism, which you should,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but you're not willing to, well, then don't do it for the Hall of Fame either.
Yeah, so I think we're both on the same exact page there, and as far as the Writers Association, I think we're, as time goes by, you're gonna have younger members come in, older members phase themselves out, but you know as it goes, right now we're at a time where it's really frustrating because we're trying to get these new fans, and they're like, like my friend Raymond here, like he's probably like, dude, playoff baseball is dope. It's fun. It's exciting to watch. Like that Braves Dodgers series, like the World Series, like there's so many good moments, but it's like, then that it's just backed by this like just weird judgy system, and it's like, well, how can you really invest so much time into it? It makes me feel a little silly sometimes. So um, I understand, like, and why some people just don't decide not to buy into it completely, and because of things like this. I think we're a few years away. I know the Veterans Committee of Hall of Fame voting is there to kind of protect against stuff like that, which I'm glad that's in place. I'm sure Bonds is going to get in. I'm sure Schilling's going to get in over time. It just sucks that that it's not the way it's supposed to be. Like they should have been in already. So And there's a long list of those types of guys too. Those are just the two that we highlighted.
Right, right. Um, Thanks for the question, Raymond David. Appreciate it. And let's move on. The final Instagram question is from our buddy Andrew Riddle. And so he's at Andrew A. Riddle 3284. This is, if the
Sure.
Dodgers don't sign Turner, what's the most likely option at third base?
At this point, any trade options are pretty much off the table as we're approaching spring training, as far as I'm concerned. Some of the guys that needed to sign already signed. I think it's internal, man. I think it's what an Edwin Rios slash Muncy at third slash Tris Taylor. See what Gavin Lux does at second to see if you can move Taylor over. I think it's a mixture of things. It's not that we don't have the internal solution. I just think we can't call ourselves the same contender that we called ourselves last season if you take out Justin Turner out of the lineup and don't replace him with something equal or better, right? I think that's just such a key piece to this team. It's been such a key piece to this team. And if you were going to replace him, it had to be with the guy, honestly, like Nolan Arenado or, Matt Chapman, those types of players, just because Turner has been that guy come postseason at least, um, so I think, we already have an answers, or internal answers, but I just don't think we're as good of a team without him as we are with him.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, there are internal options. Whether or not any of those options are an answer to replacing him, would remain to be seen, obviously. But
Yeah.
there's plenty. There is options. They're built on depth. And so yeah, you said Edwin Rio sliding Taylor in there. If Lux can prove himself at second base, or
Yeah.
McKinstry, let's say, were to,
Yeah. That's
you
another
know,
one.
there's definitely options. It's just we want Justin Turner back. I still am a firm believer that he will be back. I think if he was going to be gone, he would have already gotten
Yeah.
that offer somewhere and signed elsewhere. I think it'll work out, and then we'll figure out any other holes or solutions that we need to look at beyond that.
Agreed.
So thanks, Andrew, for the question. Let's move over to Twitter. We've got our Mount Rushmore member Daniel at Dan Kalbacher on Twitter. First
And
question
man,
there. And so Dan's asking us, Dodgers are pretty stacked from last year, even if they don't sign Turner. Dodgers are pretty stacked last year, even if they don't sign anyone new. And this is assuming Turner resigns, which we are
okay,
assuming.
right.
What is the one position you see should be addressed beyond the Justin Turner situation?
Beyond the Justin Turner, honestly, man, I think run it. Like that's what we start the
Yeah,
season with. I think I don't think, at least before the season starts, um, with that type of talent that we have, with Justin Turner, assuming he's there, but also obviously the Mookie Betts, the Cody Bellingers and the Will Smiths that are these. I didn't even mention Corey Seager yet. Like we have a stacked team, and to run out that lineup every single day is a privilege already. So you're put in a position where it's like, hey, you can start the season with that, play probably really well, and then just see what you need at the deadline. So I think, honestly, with that, this is also with the assumption that David Price is going to return,
correct.
um, and that bolsters our starting lineup, our starting rotation. Sorry, in a way where some guys are going to have to get relegated back to the bullpen. Like it's
That strengthens the bullpen.
yeah, exactly. So we'll see. You know, what we need at the deadline, but right now I think the question is third base. I think that's the question. But beyond that, assuming we sign JT, I think we're ready to go.
Yeah, it's third base, and I would say a right-handed bat to help balance out that lineup, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I think it's just positional competition at that point. What happens
Hmm.
to left field? How's Pollock? How do the people look out of spring training?
Yeah.
Chris Taylor, Gavin Lux, what's going on there? You know what I mean with him.
Yeah.
So it really just comes down to that. In addition to the pitching staff, like you said, who's going to win the battles at the position of battles? Obviously, most of this team is pretty locked in: right field, center field, first base.
Yeah.
Most of the
Sure.
pitching rotation, but there are some spots that are to be won in spring training, and let's see what
Hmm.
happens with that and as the season progresses.
Yeah.
So I
Absolutely.
appreciate you, Dan. Next Mount Rushmore, we got John at Will Loves Dodger. This question is twofold. Number one, do you want Bauer? Number two, do you want Puig back? Bauer and Puig, man. Let's go.
The Rachel Luba question.
Uh-oh.
Um, yeah, okay. Do I want Bauer? I want my team to be as good as they possibly can be, right? While remaining financially responsible and setting up possible success going forward. If Trevor Bauer fits into that, solid, right? Do I want an overpay? No, because this team's already pretty good, right?
Right.
My stance with this, and I think it's your stance too, and we've kind of gone into it before. Like, my thing is just to rule somebody out for anything, that's not criminal. Like, is irresponsible. It's not a good way to run your team. So, for me, all the Twitter stuff, all the the antics. Is it getting old? Yeah, right. Just sign with the team. It doesn't have to be a show at this point. At least at this far into the off season. I don't mind if you make a little show out of it, but right now you're kind of holding teams hostage to a sense.
Yeah.
That's what's bothering me about it. Um, but again, that's what's probably keeping the Dodgers in the mix, to be honest. So it's not that bothers me. I think anybody that actually lets that bother them is soft to an extent. Like, come on, like, just again, like, I Twitter behavior, anything that's not criminal. Like, do I condone it? Probably not. But right, am I gonna let it offend me? Is anybody actually getting hurt? That's the question. Is anybody actually getting hurt? No. Okay, like, let's make it about baseball then. So, do I want him? Hell of a pitcher, Cy Young winner. Like, who? Like, that's of course the type of player you want on your team.
A competitor. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
dude, and he proved it in the postseason this last year. The one game that he pitched just balled out. So he seems like he's kind of cut out to be on this type of team. Um, so I think it's a good fit, to be honest. I just, it's got to make sense, man. If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. If it doesn't mean wins, it doesn't make sense. So it's got to be those two things, and I think it could. I don't want to see a super long term deal. We don't need to attach ourselves to anybody that's not on this team to that type of deal at the moment. Anything long term with high AAV. But if it's one of those short term high AAV deals, honestly, bring them, and we'll figure the rest out. But yeah, that's my Trevor Bauer bit. What do you got?
Yeah, I'll do Bauer, and then we'll finish off with Puig.
Yeah.
So similar. I mean, nothing he's ever tweeted or said. I'm going to shout out our buddy Jesse Moore, Dodger Blues.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I'm not offended doesn't mean I agree with it.
Perfect. Yeah.
And just because I disagree with something doesn't mean I'm offended by it.
Yep.
So yeah, none of that is bothersome. Like you mentioned, yeah, at this point it's like it's getting old,
Yeah.
with the holding the offseason hostage, so to speak. He's not the first,
No, I don't. Yeah.
high profile free agent to ever do that. That happens
Mm-hmm.
pretty much every offseason at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's a high AAV for a short-term deal, I'm with it. Remember when it came out that supposedly the Dodgers had offered Bryce Harper that 4-year deal, like insane
Yeah.
AAV? I'm down for something like that for like 2 years or whatever it is.
Right.
Totally down.
And that really just defines the Dodgers, like just being responsible, right? Like long-term deals typically aren't responsible. The two that you're going to give out, it's got to be for literally a generational talent. I know we throw that out there like nothing, like it doesn't mean anything. No, generational talent.
Yeah,
Clayton
Mookie
Kershaw.
Betts is that.
Yeah, Clayton Kershaw was probably the
Hey.
first generational talent. Mookie Betts, generational talent. That's who you give those deals to. Because even though maybe at the back end of those deals it's not going to be what it should be, although so far so good even with Clayton Kershaw, we extended him and he got us a World Series. But with Mookie, remains to be seen. So far so good. He's not going to win us a World Series in the first year. So with all that, yeah, you don't want to do that. But yeah, honestly, like the Bryce Harper deal, even if it was that short term high AAV, so the way it looks might not have gotten the production that we needed. Like last year was a decent short season, but if like, hey, there's only 1 or 2 years left on this deal, if it's just not working out, like you can live with that. So leave those deals to teams like the Phillies and all that stuff. So
Agreed.
So yeah, the next one's Puig. Do I want Puig back? Nah, man. I think that ship has sailed. I don't think it's a fit. His best defensive position. I think we're all set there.
Right.
I think, I mean, players like Yasiel Puig always hold a special place in my heart. Got a soft spot for that guy. But I just don't think it's not a fit, man. I mean, what are you gonna? No, I think that a player like Puig, honestly, and I know it's low hanging fruit for a Cuban guy. Maybe a team like the Marlins makes sense. A team that actually played pretty good ball last year just needs a little bit of a boost somewhere, and
Right.
he can have some type of resurgence to his career. I think that's good there. I think a team like the Reds now, maybe, like the team that, if they're going to try to do all the, which I guess the expanded playoffs part aren't happening, but just teams that are kind of on the cusp or having have an opportunity to really contend in their own divisions. Like, I think those are the teams that make sense for him. Got love for Puig, but, also too, the whole ripping up the scouting report thing always left a bad taste in my mouth. And
Yep.
that's just, come on, man. Like, that's, there's things that are hard for me to come back from. And that's
If he's
definitely one
positioned
of them.
properly and makes that catch in game 2 of the World Series.
It's a different series. It really is. It's a completely different series, right? It's a big what if at this point, but moments make series. So that could have been a moment. So, So, that's
I
just
mean,
that's my piece on Puig.
Puig has the arm to play third base, but he's certainly not a third baseman. So
right, he's got the arm to
just
pitch.
yeah, right. So just like that wouldn't happen. I mean, I don't see the fit on the team. Although I think he would need a team where he does have good veteran presence and things of that nature.
Yeah,
I don't know where that is, but hey, go to Boston, man. Go with Verdugo and Kike over there, or go to Seattle or something. I don't know, but
yeah.
uh,
There's spots for him now. For him to get exiled from the game, like, that's not right either. Like
oh
last
right,
year, he should have been playing. Honestly, like, there's some teams that are just running out garbage onto the field,
right.
and they could have gotten Puig at a deal. But what are you scared of? You know what I mean? Like, it's a big mad at time. Like if you're not the thing is, the Dodgers are a winning team, so like that doesn't, you know what I mean? But if you're a team that's not that good,
Colorado, go to Colorado.
if you have, oh my gosh, oh my God, he's like the perfect guy for that team. But if you have a team that's not playing that well, you have holes in your lineup, and you can get a guy with Puig's talent for, honestly, probably a decent deal. Then it's irresponsible of you for not to pursue that, and it's a real insecurity you have on the way your organization is run, right? It's for the Dodgers, it's too high of a risk. Why? Because they have more to lose. Like, that's really what it is. Other teams, Rockies makes a lot of sense there. Like teams like that, like what do you have to lose? Like, what you're just scared you're not gonna have any fans in the stand? You already don't. Like, you know what I mean? Like, come on. So this guy has it's a higher risk than maybe other players, but with a potentially higher reward. So it's if you have holes in your lineup, absolutely no excuse. I know there's teams out there with garbage farm systems. It's not like they have this guy coming up that they're saving room for. Like, no. Like, you're just a middle of the pack organization like you've always been. Try to get better. And guys like Puig are out there. So that's my
Yeah,
thoughts on Puig.
appreciate the question, John. I think that wraps up. That wraps up the final question. So appreciate everybody for chiming in, getting us
Yeah.
at on Twitter, on Instagram, and we'll try to give more love to Facebook. And go from there.
Shout out to that. Yeah, shout out to the Instagram followers there for providing some of these questions. And shout out to the franchise in general. So that's gonna wrap this episode up. Season 4, episode 2, all mailbag. So we'll try to do this again next week. Hopefully there's more baseball news to report on. But until then, you're the franchise. We're the Franks. We'll talk to you next week. Peace. Solid.
Nice.
All right.